The Nintendo hacker by the name of Gary Bowser has been sentenced to 40 months in jail and to pay a fine of $14.5 million for piracy. Well, the official charges are conspiracy to circumvent technological measures and to traffic in circumvention devices and trafficking in circumvention devices. Now, Gary, who was involved with Team Executor, was releasing mod kits for the Nintendo Switch and allowing you to run a custom firmware on a Nintendo Switch, and then from there, you could run homebrew software, you could even run Linux on a Nintendo Switch, but more importantly, the thing that really got these guys in trouble, especially with Nintendo, was that these mod chips allowed you to run pirated games on the Switch, which Nintendo is claiming has cost them over $65 million in losses. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that piracy is wrong, and I especially am not going to say that piracy is the same as theft. I think that that's a really smooth brain take that some people have on this matter, because piracy and theft are two completely different things. The reason why theft is wrong is because the person you're stealing from is suffering an immediate and tangible financial loss. Like if I own a gas station or a corner store and someone comes in and they steal some honey buns and a case of beer, I'm out some money right away. I obviously have to buy that beer and honey buns from the manufacturer. That cost me money so that I can sell it to my patrons. So now that's inventory that I didn't profit off of. And if you were to take the last ones, then maybe a paying customer that comes in later doesn't want to spend any money with me. Or maybe if a customer sees this theft happening, they might not feel safe in my store and they don't pay me because I don't have what they want and I'm not keeping a good environment there. But with piracy, you're making copies of something. Like if I download a copy of a video game, that video game doesn't all of a sudden disappear off the shelf of a random GameStop. You're literally downloading it, so you're not actually going to GameStop and causing any disruption. It's still going to be there for somebody to buy. And while I'm sure that piracy does oftentimes account for some loss of revenue, I think in most cases, the people that are pirating a game, they wouldn't have even played it in the first place if they had to actually pay for it. And honestly, I do think that piracy can be good for business in a lot of ways. If you play it right, like say if you're a music artist or some other kind of content creator that already has their brand built out, because without piracy, a lot of people would never hear or see whatever kind of art or content that you're creating and then become fans of you in the first place. Like, take people in Russia, for example. So this is a country pretty notorious for having a lot of piracy, and there's a few reasons for it. For one, the internet is actually pretty good there. There's less legal ramifications for doing it. You're not going to get in trouble like you would here in the United States. Search engines like Yandex that are based in Russia are actually really useful for finding torrents, and they're even better than Google or Bing. And hell, just searching for torrents in Russian is a pretty good way to find them. But people in Russia, they usually also make a lot less money than people in the United States, so it's just not practical for the average person to spend $10 on a music album or $60 on a game and other things that are just non-essential to consume content. It doesn't make sense for them to spend money on it. So if you ask for these prices, then people in these countries are only going to be able to enjoy it through piracy. And this is also part of the reason why services like Steam sell games for much cheaper. They actually make a lot of money off of Russia now that games are cheaper over there. That's why I say if you're going to sell some kind of content, it's a good idea to just prepare for piracy and not really spend a whole lot of money in lawyers trying to fight it. Just set your business up in such a way, like offer them for really cheap in regions where piracy is more common, and then that way you'll actually be able to make some money there. And in the case of musical artists, someone might pirate your music, but then they become a fan and they go to your concerts and they buy your merch. Most of the more business savvy artists, they've already realized this, so they tend to concentrate a lot more on those other aspects of their brand in order to make money, and then the music is something that they don't care if sometimes it gets taken for free. So yeah, obviously, I'm not going to take any hard anti-piracy stance here, and certainly not an anti-modding stance. I mean, hell, modding is basically a prerequisite for me to buy pretty much any kind of smartphone, computer, or other device. Like if I can't upgrade it, or if I can't hack the software and then change some things myself, or install somebody else's custom ROM to it, then it's not worth my money. I'm almost always on the side of modders and against companies that try to enforce some kind of DRM and to prevent modding of their devices. But with this Gary Bowser guy, he was kind of an ass, all right? There's a lot of other people that he's been screwing over the years besides Nintendo. Another project that he was involved in was creating the Cobra Blackfin, which was a device that lets you mod and play pirated games on the PS Vita. So they hired an engineer to write the code for them, which took this developer, I think, about 4 years, and it ended up being like 76 gigabytes of data that actually went into creating this project, but he never actually got paid for it. Gary claimed that it was because the Blackfin didn't sell well and that he would pay the dev someday, but he never came through and actually paid this developer. They've also been caught on several occasions stealing GPL code like Atmosphere, which is a customized firmware for the Nintendo Switch, which they used in their own paid proprietary version called SXOS. So obviously, stealing somebody's code and then claiming it as your own, and more importantly, stealing FOSS code, stealing GPL code, and putting it into a paid proprietary project is a big no-no, and that's very scummy. It completely goes against the spirit of the hacking and homebrew community, and of course is also illegal since this is a legal software license that's being violated. And they've also tried to break GPL again by bribing a RetroArch dev to make an OpenGL-enabled build of RetroArch exclusive to the Team Executor hardware. But probably the worst thing of all that Gary's been involved in is the Gateway 3DS. So this was a flash cart for the Nintendo 3DS made by Gateway, which was another group that Gary Bowser was involved in. So this lets you do a few different things. Like there's legitimate use cases for this. Like I believe you were able to store a whole bunch of different games just on one card. So that's obviously a use case where somebody could have been using this so-called piracy hardware, but they're not actually pirating anything. They're buying games legitimately, and then they're all just they're storing them all on one card for the sake of convenience. But this also allowed you to play pirated games and to also mod games for the 3DS. But the team that developed this add-on card also implemented a pretty sinister form of DRM into it. Basically, if you tried using a knockoff version of a gateway cart, then this gateway cart would inject a virus into your console in order to brick it. And what's worse about this is the way that it was written, it would brick people's consoles who had both a legit gateway cart and a knockoff one. And they also did the same thing with SXOS on the Nintendo Switch if you tried to load a pirated copy of that. So this is not some kind of software bug that was put in there by accident. This is something that they intentionally put on the device to try and have a monopoly over 3DS mods and piracy, and to force people to pay for their pirated software, which again was using code stolen from GPL projects to begin with. Now, I do think that the fines and the jail time is ultimately pretty ridiculous, especially when you read into the indictment and the court documents, because the whole reason why Gary is being punished is not for screwing over the developer and not for bricking people's game consoles, but because Nintendo claims they've lost like $65 million as a result of these projects over the years, which is kind of hard to prove because, like I said, a lot of people that are pirating games, they probably wouldn't have played those games anyway. So you can't just count every single pirated game that's out there, oh, that's a loss of revenue. There's plenty of bullshit games that we all know people would not really pay for or would not really play if they had to actually pay retail price for it. And I'm sure that a lot of people probably wouldn't have even bought the Nintendo Switch in the first place if they couldn't mod it and they couldn't just install a whole bunch of games on it for free. But even though the jail time and the fines are because of Nintendo, this still almost feels like some kind of a cosmic justice. If karma was real, then this would definitely be an example of it. Now, I'm not really into the game modding scene these days. I haven't really been since the days of J-tagged Xbox 360s, but I do hope that whoever takes Gary's place as the new big-time home-brewing pirate has some better ethics, because like I said, I don't think that it's immoral to pirate video games or any kind of software, especially if it's from big studios. Now, pirating from indie games and indie studios that are just getting started out, I do think is kind of scummy. I've personally never done that, but I don't feel sorry for Nintendo about this at all. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Like and comment, tag the algorithm, and have a great day.